Who's going to say something? Who's going to do something? What'll happen if, just if, not that I'm expecting it, this same group goes out there Sunday and looks pretty much the same? Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer up daily shots of Penguins and Pirates right where you found this. It will be Steelers versus Ravens Sunday at 4:25 p.m. at Heinz Field. And hearing everyone speak about it, it sure sounds like it'll be a very different team in black and gold that comes out of that tunnel. What if it isn't? And what if all of this talk and, we're going to be this and we're going to do that really ends up becoming just more of the same? How will it reflect, not just on Mike Tomlin, but how about the captains as well? Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Heyward, Derek Watt is the special teams captain. They have a lot of other leader types or people of whom you would expect leadership in that locker room. What then? What then? And really, I'm going to say this, and I don't think it's going to be all that popular, all right? What have we actually even heard on this front? This was probably the strongest thing to come from Ben's weekly Wednesday meeting with us on the South Side.
You know what? If you have to give guys a message at this point in the year with where we are, then maybe it's time to get guys in there that don't need a message. People need to understand what this is about.
And when he's talking, he's doing so with a big smile on his face, and there's not a raised voice. There's not a sense of heightened urgency from the previous week. Don't get me wrong. The last guy I'm going to pick on in this circumstance is Ben. Say what you want about his performance against the Bengals, and he was not good. Those were two pretty lousy picks in the first half. But you don't have to wonder whether or not he quit. You don't have to wonder whether or not he was trying, and you never, ever can question his competitive spirit. I mean, he is who he is. He's achieved what he has. He's Ben Roethlisberger. But that doesn't mean that he can have an impact on the people who are playing under him or playing with him, however you choose to characterize it, on that offense. Because you can also hear at least some exasperation in his voice when he was asked about the difference in the generations.
Of course you do. You worry about it because, I don't know. There can't be many, like one handful of guys in that locker room that even remember who Dan Rooney was. And so it's you can pass it on. And like I said, I told those guys a story of why I didn't want the music, because you love to hear the stories, and I just told you all that. But you can only tell guys those stories so much where they kind of are like, okay, it's just someone just talking kind of thing. So you can pass on tradition all you want, but the further you get away from something, the harder it is to do. And I'm sure at some point I'll be sitting at home just like I'm sure there's probably some veteran guys that I played with that watch us or hear the people talking in the media or some of the things that happen and probably shake their heads and say, man, they wish that's not the Steeler way, or that's not the way that we used to do it. That's just the way things go. And I'm sure there's, the 70s team probably looked at us even 10, 20 years. It just happens. But, who knows?
And he's right about that too, by the way. When his group came in, it was all the old school guys were wondering why so-and-so isn't acting as tough and macho as Jack Lambert or Mean Joe Green and whatever else. And there's always going to be a disconnect when it comes to generations, one to the next. But that group, the Ben group, on both sides of the ball, found their own version of carrying on the Steelers' way. They found players on offense and, in particular, on defense who were tough as nails, who were ready to run through a wall every Sunday at 1:02 p.m. And this ain't it. And you can't manufacture it. You can't manufacture it. Anybody who's expecting this game Sunday against the Ravens to be some sort of revival or awakening or, well, this is just the default mode. This is how they really should have been playing all along. This is who they are. Maybe it isn't. Maybe you just believe what it is that they show you. Who is it, for example? This is much easier to do when you start naming names. Who is it on either side of the ball that you feel has been a little bit soft but is normally way, way, way nastier? This portion of Daily Shot of Steelers is brought to you by Point Park University. Choose from nearly 100 career-focused programs leading to bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. Choose when and how you'd prefer to do that studying, whether it's at Point Park's gorgeous downtown Pittsburgh campus, whether it's online, maybe a flexible hybrid format would work best for you. Find out more about all of this at pointpark.edu. Who on offense? Who is it? Chase Claypool? Is he is he the guy who just is going to all of a sudden uncover his inner mean dude? No. Is Deontay Johnson all of a sudden going to figure out how to hustle on non-Deontay Johnson plays, as the film flagrantly exposed that he didn't do at all in Cincinnati? Nope. Is anyone on that offensive line going to all of a sudden look really nasty? And we just don't know. They're all children. What about on the other side of the ball? Is anyone still believing that Devin Bush is slowed down solely by the knee injury or the knee recovery? Is anyone seeing a nasty side toward anybody at all who's played like nickel corner or the other two interior defensive line spots next to Cam? No. This isn't something that's just going to show up because the head coach and no doubt the assistant coaches and a couple of the older players spoke up, much less people who are outside the organization, which, by the way, is how they view people who have graduated. You're not in the building. You can get a round of applause when you come in, and they'll, acknowledge you and thank you, whatever else, but, you're not in there. You're not a Steeler still. They're not affected by something that Ryan Clark says or Chris Hoke says. They're just not. So, awaiting this grand transformation, I'll tell you what shape it'll take. Cam will be even more through the roof. TJ will be even more through the roof. Joe Hayden will be even more through the roof. Ben and the other people that you can count on that you know about, they'll be that much more motivated than the norm. And that alone might be enough to take them past a grossly overblown Baltimore team. But don't think there's going to be some broader renaissance in the equation. There just won't. When we come back, just one question. Time for just one question, and today's J1Q comes from Bill, who asks, DK, how is it that the men outside the room, and Bill puts that in quotes referring to Mike Tomlin's line on Tuesday, how is it that the men outside the room get it, yet the men inside the room don't? How is it that the men outside the room understand the standard, and yet the men in the room don't? I'm really leery of lumping everybody together. That's why in that opening segment I was separating out names. It isn't everyone. It isn't as simple as saying there's a cutoff point where if you were born before this year, then you care. If you were born after that year, then you're Claypool and you want to hear music at practices. Because that's not fair and more importantly, it's not accurate. You know whose name I've left out of this discussion entirely? Najee Harris. Najee Harris is younger than Claypool. Najee Harris has less experience than almost everyone on the roster, being that he was just drafted. Najee Harris is mature and committed and passionate and informed and aware. He's all of those things. We can't just take the negative examples that there are and attach them and affix them to a generation and say, here it is, this is how it is. Because you could do the same thing, truth be told, through any part of football history. Okay? This idea that everything was perfect and spotless and in the 1970s and the 80s, and Chuck Noll never oversaw or never tolerated any nonsense when in fact he had a defensive lineman shooting at a police helicopter in Latrobe. You know, I mean, these are narratives, they're myths that get built up over time. You know, the same stuff applies to Bill Cowher. Cowher would never stand for this stuff. Cowher stood for all kinds of stuff. He put up with all kinds of crap. Santonio Holmes and wouldn't even scratch the surface of the stuff that he put up with. But no one referred to him as a player's coach or someone who understands the players with all the surreptitious shots that are involved in an assessment like that. There is a difference. Generations do change, as you heard Ben reference in the opening segment. But there are components that can be carried over. If you want to have an indictment of a Claypool or of other players who are like that, who seem like they're more interested in themselves or gasp having fun than they are in winning football games, then you can go after that individual player. And, by the way, you can go after the Steelers for having drafted that individual player and not having somehow spotted that characteristic in their upbringing or in their collegiate background. That's where I would be going with this. When I say that I don't believe that this current group of Steelers, the ones that I'm citing, have that it factor where they're going to figure it out, I'm not saying that based on when they were born. I'm saying that based on who they are and what they're showing. I am not going to lump them all into one big generational category and say this is all trash, because I've got Najee Harris standing right over here to show that there's a right way to do this. And by the way, Najee has his own fun. This isn't some boring guy, and I'm not citing him because, you know, he acts like someone from the 60s or the 70s would have. Najee's very much his own guy, very much a free spirit. He just happens to be all business whenever it's time to be all business. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. We're going to do one more this week, tomorrow, leading into this Baltimore game.